One human, no backup. The alien Empress and her army were stunned. Captain Noah Kessler's chest rose and fell with each shallow breath as he crouched low behind the broken remnants of a Zorath warship. His dark, weathered uniform blended into the rubble of the alien city. It was hard to tell where the crumbling stone ends and his figure began. The planet's twin suns had set hours ago, casting long shadows across the alien landscape. But Noah knew better than to get comfortable. He couldn't afford to relax, not with the Zorath Empire so close. His heart pounded in his chest, not just from the adrenaline but also from the gnawing sense of helplessness. His team, his squad, was gone. The mission had been a disaster from the start. They were supposed to infiltrate the Zorath stronghold, sabotage their main power grid, and get out. Simple, right? Except nothing had gone according to plan. The sabotage worked too well. The Zorath were enraged. They were hunting him now, and Noah was all alone. A lone human against an entire alien empire. His mind kept replaying that thought like a broken record, but he refused to let it break his resolve. If he let fear take root, he'd die here, just another casualty in a war humanity couldn't win. His hand brushed the broken comms device at his waist. It was shattered beyond repair, but he had tried. He had sent out a distress signal, though he knew there was little chance of any kind of response. The recon team had been too far from the main fleet when they got ambushed. He wasn't even sure if the fleet knew he was alive. They had no reason to believe a single soldier would survive such an attack. The Zorath Empire had been ravaging human colonies for years, unstoppable and merciless in their conquests. And now here he was on their homeworld, an insignificant speck caught in the crossfire. His mind raced through all the scenarios, each worse than the last. He could hear the heavy, armored footsteps of Zorath soldiers patrolling in the distance, and his pulse quickened. Noah took a deep breath and steadied himself. Survival wasn't about strength, it was about wit. He could still outsmart them. He had to. His eyes scanned the wreckage around him, searching for anything useful. There. A rusted piece of alien technology, likely a weapon, lay half buried under debris. He crawled forward carefully, his fingers brushing the strange material. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, shrill beeping from his wrist communicator. He froze. It shouldn't have been working. It shouldn't have been able to pick up a signal. For a moment, Noah considered ignoring it, but the faint whisper of a voice broke through the static. "Human, I see you." The voice was cold, unfeeling, like it was simply a part of the surroundings. Noah's blood ran cold. He had no idea if it was a trap or if he had unknowingly activated something that sent a signal to the wrong people. His finger hovered over the transmitter, unsure. He wasn't even sure who was speaking. A crackle of static followed, then a new voice. It was deep, commanding, female. "You are on our world now," the voice continued. "You will be caught, you will be executed, but first we shall see what you are capable of." The voice cut out abruptly, leaving Noah to stare at the flickering screen. His breath quickened, but his resolve only strengthened. Whoever this was, they were playing a game he didn't want to lose. He pressed a few buttons on the comm device, trying to get any sort of transmission back. It was useless. He had only just enough power left to listen, not to respond. And then it came to him, the signal. Whoever was on the other end wasn't just taunting him. They were watching. They knew where he was, and they wanted to see what he could do. Noah's mind raced. He didn't know who they were, but one thing was certain. They weren't allies. The Zorath had him cornered, and this voice, whoever it was, had just put a target on his back. Noah pulled himself into a crouch, staying low and making sure the shadows hid him from sight. Every muscle in his body screamed for him to rest, but he couldn't. Not yet. He had no choice but to move. Time to make them regret underestimating him. He took a cautious step forward, weaving through the wreckage, trying to stay out of sight of the ever-patrolling Zorath soldiers. His hand instinctively went to the small blade at his waist. It wasn't much, just a survival knife, but it was better than nothing. Noah's mind flashed back to his training, back to Earth, back to the military bases where he had been taught to fight and survive. It wasn't the weapons that mattered. It was the mind behind them. The humans had proved that over and over again throughout the war. While the Zorath relied on brute strength and their overwhelming numbers, humans fought smarter. They adapted, and they survived. That's what Noah was going to do. He didn't know how, but he was going to survive this. He would make sure of it. A low hum echoed in the distance, Zorath patrols scanning the area for any signs of movement. Noah froze, holding his breath. He had to wait, Timing was everything. The Zorath soldiers had a predictable pattern. They marched, they stopped, they scanned. There was a small window of opportunity where he could slip past them unnoticed. His pulse raced in his ears as the hum of the patrols grew louder, closer. He knew it wouldn't be long before they passed by. Just a few seconds, and he would be in the clear. But then something unexpected happened. The ground shook. Noah's knees buckled as a sudden tremor rattled through the city. The sky above was illuminated by a massive burst of light, followed by a low rumble. The Zorath patrols stopped in their tracks, confusion rippling through their ranks. Something had disrupted their sensors, something big. Noah didn't have time to question it. The distraction was his chance. He sprinted forward, moving faster than he thought possible, using the chaos to his advantage. For the first time in hours, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could make it out of this alive. As he neared the edge of the wreckage, he ducked behind a crumbled structure, watching the Zorath soldiers regroup. They were trying to make sense of what had just happened, but Noah didn't care about that. He needed to keep moving. He needed to get off this world, and fast. But just as he turned to make his escape, he heard it again. That voice. "Human, you cannot hide forever." The voice was so cold it sent a chill down his spine. Noah's mind raced. Who was this? Why were they watching him? And why didn't they just kill him already? As he stood there, frozen in place, a new voice interrupted. It was harsh, demanding, and full of authority. "Bring him to me, now." Noah's stomach dropped as he realized that voice belonged to someone powerful. The message was clear. This wasn't just any soldier. This was someone far more dangerous, someone who wasn't afraid to make an example out of him. With a final glance over his shoulder, Noah turned and ran. Noah's breath came in ragged gasps as he sprinted through the darkened streets of the Zorath city, his boots pounding against the cracked stone beneath him. The strange city stretched endlessly around him, a mix of towering, angular buildings and ruins. The night had fallen, but the skies were still tinged with the glow of the twin moons. It was disorienting. Everything about this place was foreign, alien in every sense of the word. But there was no time to admire the view. The voice had come again, the voice that haunted him, cold and confident. Whoever it was, they were watching him, tracking his every movement. Noah could feel their gaze even now as he darted into a shadowy alley. His heart hammered in his chest. He didn't know who they were or what they wanted, but they had made one thing clear. He wasn't going to make it out of this alive without a fight. For the first time since he'd been dropped onto this forsaken world, Noah allowed himself a moment to think. He had no way of knowing if the message he'd sent had even been received by anyone on Earth. His team was gone. The Zorath forces had been hunting him relentlessly ever since the sabotage mission had failed. It was a miracle he'd lasted this long. Noah had always prided himself on his ability to think on his feet, to improvise when the situation demanded it. But this was different. This was beyond anything he'd ever faced. This wasn't just about survival. This was a test. Whoever was behind the voice, whoever was controlling this game, wanted him to prove something. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized that it wasn't just his life on the line. This was bigger than him. He paused to catch his breath, crouching low against the wall of a ruined building. His eyes scanned the area, every sound amplifying in his ears. There was no sign of the Zorath patrols. Not yet, at least. But he couldn't afford to be complacent. They would be back, and when they were, they would be more organized, more determined. He needed to keep moving. Just as he turned to continue his escape, a sudden explosion shook the ground beneath him, throwing him off balance. The force of the blast sent him sprawling to the ground, his head spinning. For a brief moment, everything went black. When his vision cleared, Noah realized the source of the explosion hadn't come from far away. It was close. Too close. In fact, the shockwave had come from the very building he had been heading toward. He pushed himself to his feet, adrenaline coursing through his veins as he stumbled toward the site of the blast. The sound of distant alarms echoed through the streets as debris fell from the sky. Something was happening in the city, something bigger than his desperate escape. Noah's first instinct was to run, but he hesitated. His curiosity got the better of him. The building he was heading toward had been the center of Zorath military operations on this side of the planet. If something had exploded there, it could be his only chance to slip past their defenses. He took a deep breath and moved forward, carefully weaving through the maze of collapsed structures. His hands tightened around the survival knife at his waist. The blade was small, but it would do the job if it came down to it. The Zorath soldiers were formidable, but Noah had been trained to fight dirty. He wasn't about to die without making them regret underestimating him. As he neared the edge of the blasted building, he ducked low behind a pile of rubble. His heart raced in his chest as he cautiously peered around the corner. He could see figures moving inside the crumbling structure, Zorath soldiers, clearly unaware of his presence. They were scrambling, trying to contain the damage, issuing orders in a language he didn't understand. But Noah didn't need to know their language to know what was happening. This was chaos. This was his moment. He had no plan, no grand strategy. But one thing was certain. He couldn't waste the opportunity. With his pulse thundering in his ears, Noah darted forward, keeping close to the walls and moving with the shadows. His feet barely made a sound as he slipped past the distracted soldiers, his eyes scanning for anything useful. A low whirring sound cut through the air. A door on the far side of the room slid open, and out stepped someone, or something, Noah hadn't expected to see. She was tall, standing with an air of authority that sent a shiver down his spine. Her skin shimmered in the dim light, a deep shade of violet, and her eyes glowed with an unsettling intensity. Her features were sharp, almost regal, and the strange armor she wore seemed to shift as if alive. She was the most alien thing Noah had ever seen, and yet he immediately knew who she was. Empress Zalara, the ruler of the Zorath Empire. Noah froze. His instinct was to flee, to run before she saw him, but he couldn't move. The Empress was standing right there, just a few meters away. She was powerful, imposing, and everything about her screamed danger. And yet, as she glanced around, her gaze seemed to pass right over him, as if he wasn't even there. Noah held his breath, waiting for the right moment to make a move. The soldiers were still too busy trying to control the damage, and the Empress was distracted. But that wouldn't last long. She was too sharp, too aware of her surroundings. He had to act, and fast. Just as he began to move, the voice returned, colder than ever. "He's here," it said, the words laced with a strange satisfaction. "Bring him forward." Noah's heart skipped a beat. The voice was everywhere now, echoing in his mind, reverberating in the walls around him. He wasn't alone. He wasn't even in control of his own fate anymore. Someone was pulling the strings. Someone was orchestrating all of this. Before he could react, the soldiers near the Empress turned, their weapons drawn. They moved with practiced precision, surrounding him before he could retreat. The Zorath were fast, but Noah wasn't about to make this easy for them. He had one chance, and he couldn't waste it. In a blur of motion, he threw himself at the nearest soldier, slamming into them with the full force of his body. The soldier stumbled back, giving Noah just enough room to spin and bring his knife down on another guard's arm. The blade cut through the alien's armor with surprising ease, and the soldier howled in pain, dropping their weapon. Noah didn't stop. He couldn't. The Empress was right there, and if he didn't act now, this would all be over. But just as he lunged toward the next soldier, a voice boomed across the room. "Enough!" The command was so powerful, so filled with authority, that it stopped Noah in his tracks. Every Zorath soldier froze, their weapons held in midair. Even the Empress, standing tall in the center of the room, turned her piercing gaze on him. Noah's pulse pounded in his ears as the room fell into a tense silence. He was caught. No escape. No allies, just him, a lone human, facing the most powerful force in the galaxy. And yet, as he looked into the Empress's eyes, he saw something unexpected. It wasn't anger. It wasn't rage. It was curiosity. "You are bold human," Empress Zalara said, her voice cold but tinged with an unsettling calm. "You have survived longer than most. I want to see what you can do." Noah didn't know what she meant. He didn't know how to respond. All he knew was that this moment, this encounter, was only the beginning. And whatever happened next, it would change everything. Noah's heart was pounding in his chest as he stood before Empress Zalara. The room, now eerily silent, felt as though the very walls were watching him. He could feel the weight of her gaze on him, sharp and calculating, and it made him nervous in a way he couldn't quite explain. He had faced danger countless times before, but this was different. This was the leader of the most powerful empire in the galaxy. And yet she didn't seem angry. Not yet. Instead, she studied him with a kind of detached curiosity, as if he were some kind of puzzle to be solved, something fascinating and unfamiliar. Noah couldn't tell whether that made her more dangerous or less. Either way, he had no choice but to stand his ground. For a moment, no one moved. The Zorath soldiers, who had moments before been ready to take him down, now stood still, weapons still drawn but lowered, awaiting their leader's next command. Even the Empress's cold demeanor didn't seem to waver. She had no doubt about her control over the situation. Noah, on the other hand, was uncertain. He had never been in a situation like this before. Back on Earth, he had always relied on his training, quick thinking, adaptability, and a soldier's instinct to survive. But this was different. The Zorath Empire wasn't just a military force. It was a culture of brutal strength, unyielding in its desire to dominate everything it encountered. The Empress finally spoke, her voice smooth but carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You fight well for a human," she said, her eyes never leaving his. "But what do you hope to accomplish? You cannot win, you are alone." Noah didn't flinch. "I didn't come here to win," he replied, his voice calm but defiant. "I came here to make sure you know we're not just going to lie down and let you crush us." A slight smile touched the Empress's lips, though it was barely noticeable. "Bold words for someone in your position," she mused, her tone almost playful. "But you've been running for days. Hiding, waiting, you've done well to survive this long, but even your kind will fall eventually. I am the ruler of the Zorath. My empire spans entire star systems. Your people can't stand against us." Noah's eyes narrowed, but he kept his voice steady. "We've beaten worse odds. And we've never stopped fighting. We may not be as big or as strong as you, but we're not afraid of you. That's what makes us dangerous." The Empress's gaze softened for a moment, and Noah thought he saw something flicker in her eyes, something like respect. But then she straightened, her posture as regal as ever. "You think you can defeat me? Your race is so small, so fragile. What could one human possibly do?" Noah took a deep breath. He had expected this. They always underestimated humanity. The bigger, stronger alien species thought they could just crush humans because they were the smallest and weakest in the galaxy. But what they didn't understand was that humans had an incredible ability to survive, to adapt. And when it came down to it, they had a unique gift that no one else seemed to possess, the will to fight, even when everything seemed lost. "I don't have to defeat you," he said quietly, locking eyes with her. "I just have to survive. And if I survive long enough, your empire will see what humanity is capable of." Zalera regarded him for a long moment. Her eyes narrowed, and for the briefest of seconds, Noah thought he saw a flicker of something, fear, pass through her cold, calculating gaze. But it was gone so quickly, he wasn't sure if it had been there at all. Without another word, the Empress turned to her soldiers, giving a subtle hand gesture. The tension in the room heightened as the soldiers closed in around him. Noah knew what this meant. They were going to test him, to see if he could really back up his words. A soldier approached from the left, brandishing a strange, long-bladed weapon. The Zorath soldier's body was heavily armored and the weapon hummed with energy. It was a kind of energy sword, capable of slicing through nearly anything. Noah had never seen anything like it before, but he didn't need to. His training had prepared him for any combat situation. He only needed to stay focused. The soldier's movements were precise, efficient, clearly trained for battle. He swung the weapon in a wide arc, aiming for Noah's torso. The attack was swift, but Noah had already anticipated it. He ducked low, rolling out of the way, narrowly avoiding the blade. As the soldier spun to follow him, Noah darted forward, using his momentum to slam into the soldier's side. The impact sent the soldier crashing to the ground. Noah wasted no time. He grabbed the fallen weapon and used it to his advantage, positioning himself between the Empress and the remaining soldiers. His muscles burned with the effort, but his mind was sharp. He had been in worse situations before. The Zorath soldiers were strong, but they were also predictable. Their reliance on brute force played into Noah's hands. The key was to stay quick, stay agile. Another soldier charged at him, this one wielding a shield and a mace. The mace was designed to crush, and the shield was nearly impenetrable. But Noah had faced heavier armor before. With a quick feint, he baited the soldier into overextending, using the soldier's own momentum against him. In one smooth motion, Noah disarmed him and knocked him out cold. Zalera stood unmoving, her eyes never leaving Noah's form. The fight was swift, almost too quick for the soldiers to react. Noah had been trained to fight in all kinds of environments, to use the terrain and his surroundings to his advantage. But more than that, he was fighting for something bigger than himself. One by one, the Zorath soldiers fell, each move calculated, each strike designed to incapacitate rather than kill. Noah wasn't here to slaughter them. He was here to show them that he wasn't the weak, defenseless human they expected. Finally, only a few soldiers remained standing, and they were clearly unsure of how to handle the situation. They had never faced someone like Noah before. The Empress's eyes were locked onto him, and though her face remained stoic, there was something in her gaze now, something different, something Noah couldn't quite place. Then, without warning, the last soldier lunged at him, trying to overpower him with brute strength. But Noah was ready. He sidestepped the attack, and in the same motion, he knocked the soldier's weapon from his hands. With a final twist, he sent the soldier tumbling to the floor. The room fell into silence once more. The soldiers, now scattered and subdued, looked to their leader for guidance. But Zalara did not speak at once. Instead, she took a slow step forward, studying Noah as if he were a specimen in a lab. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the faint hum of the energy weapons, now deactivated. "You've surprised me, human," Zalara finally said, her voice colder than before. "But don't think this changes anything. You may have beaten my soldiers, but you cannot defeat the Zorath Empire. You cannot defeat me." Noah's gaze remained steady. "Maybe not today," he said, his voice unwavering. "But we'll keep fighting, we'll keep surviving. And one day you'll see humanity isn't as weak as you think." Zalara studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable, and then to Noah's surprise she nodded. "Perhaps," she said softly. "Perhaps you are right, but the future is mine to decide, human. And I have no intention of losing to you." With that, she turned her back on him, signaling her soldiers to escort him to a new, secure location. But Noah knew that this was far from over. The Empress was intrigued, yes, but she would never admit it. And Noah was certain of one thing. This was just the beginning. The days after the encounter with Empress Zalara felt like a blur to Noah. The Zorath soldiers, once so confident and cruel, now regarded him with a mix of wariness and disbelief. He had disrupted their entire routine. They had expected a prisoner, someone to break under pressure, to beg for mercy. But Noah had shown them that he was far from the helpless human they thought he was. He wasn't broken. He wasn't defeated. Yet even as the days dragged on, Noah couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was happening, something that had nothing to do with him. The Empress's interest in him was growing, but Noah knew better than to get comfortable. If anything, her interest only made things more dangerous. He was locked in a small, dimly lit room now, far from the grand chambers where he had first met Zalara. The room was sparse. Just a narrow bed, a small desk, and a tiny window that gave him a view of the Zorath city skyline. There was a guard posted outside, but Noah had long since stopped caring about the soldiers. He was biding his time, waiting for the right moment to make his next move. He didn't know what that move would be yet, but he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't stay here forever. It was a routine. Every day, soldiers came in, giving him just enough food and water to keep him alive. They didn't speak to him much. It was clear that the Zorath had no interest in making him comfortable. They just wanted to keep him contained, to see what would happen next. And as much as Noah hated being confined to this cell, he couldn't help but wonder if they had made a mistake by keeping him alive. Empress Zalara's orders had been clear: keep him alive, but make sure he never has a chance to escape. But there was one thing the Zorath didn't understand about humans. When you push them to the edge, when you give them no other options, they will fight back. They will find a way. Noah spent his days observing the guards, studying their routines. He learned their schedules, the patterns in their patrols. He memorized the layout of the facility, finding the weaknesses in the walls and the doors. He didn't know when or how, but he knew that his time would come. Then, one afternoon, things changed. The door to his cell opened with a loud screech, and a new figure stepped inside. It wasn't one of the usual soldiers. This one was different, taller, with a set of black armor that gleamed under the dull light. A symbol was emblazoned on his chest, one Noah hadn't seen before. It was an intricate design, unlike anything the Zorath soldiers wore. He could see the faint outline of the symbol glowing, pulsing with energy. The new figure didn't speak immediately. He just stood there, observing Noah with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. Noah didn't flinch, but his mind raced. Was this a new kind of Zorath soldier, or was it something more? Finally, the figure spoke, his voice deep and measured. "You are Captain Noah Kessler, correct?" Noah nodded slowly. "I am, and you are." The figure paused, clearly not expecting the question. For a brief moment, Noah saw a flicker of uncertainty in the stranger's eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. The figure stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "I am Commander Zerk," the figure said. "I have been ordered by the Empress herself to test you." Noah's pulse quickened. He didn't like the sound of that. "Test me?" Zerk's lips curled into a slight smile. "Yes, the Empress wishes to see if you are truly as dangerous as you claim. She has underestimated you. But now she wants to know if you can really survive against us." Noah's mind whirred. This was it. The moment he had been waiting for. If he could prove himself now, it might be his one shot at getting out of this mess. "I'm not interested in playing games," Noah said, trying to keep his voice steady. "What do you want from me?" Zerk's eyes narrowed and he took a step back. "Oh, it's not about what I want. It's about what the Empress wants. She wants to see how you fare against her best." Before Noah could respond, Zerk signaled to the two soldiers standing by the door. They stepped forward, carrying a heavy-looking box. With a flick of their wrists, they opened the box, revealing a set of weapons. The weapons were unlike anything Noah had ever seen before, sleek, curved, and dangerous. Zerk looked back at Noah, his expression unreadable. "You will have to fight. You will have to prove yourself worthy of being more than just a prisoner." Noah swallowed hard. This wasn't what he had been expecting, but he had no choice. This was a test, just like Zerk had said. The Zorath wanted to break him, to prove once and for all that humanity was no match for them. But Noah wasn't about to let them win. He stepped forward, his eyes locked on the weapons. "Fine, I'll fight, but don't expect me to go down without a fight." Zerk's lips curled into another smile. "Good, then let's see how long you last." The fight was brutal, and Noah quickly realized that these soldiers weren't like the ones he had faced before. They were faster, stronger, and more coordinated. They moved like a well-oiled machine, each strike coming at him from a different angle. But Noah didn't back down. He ducked and weaved, using his speed and agility to avoid their blows. He was outnumbered, but he had fought worse odds before. His hands gripped the alien weapon tightly, the unfamiliar weight of it quickly becoming second nature. He parried a blow and then countered, using the soldiers' momentum against him. But no matter how many times he knocked them down, more soldiers kept coming. Noah's body was beginning to ache. His muscles burned, his breath came in ragged gasps, but he kept fighting. He had to prove something. He had to show them that humans weren't weak, that they weren't just toys for the Zorath to crush. As the battle raged on, Noah began to notice something strange. The Zorath soldiers weren't fighting with the same intensity they had earlier. They were hesitating. They were slowing down, looking to Zerk for guidance. That's when Noah realized the truth. He wasn't just fighting for his survival. He was fighting for something much bigger. The Empress had given him a test, yes, but this wasn't just about winning. This was about making the Zorath question everything they believed. Every time he fought back, every time he refused to give up, he was chipping away at their perception of humanity. Zerk's expression began to shift as well. What had started as a smug, confident demeanor now seemed more uncertain. He had expected Noah to crumble under the pressure. Instead, Noah was pushing back. In one final desperate move, Noah slammed the flat side of his weapon into the chest of the soldier closest to him, sending him sprawling to the ground. He didn't give the soldier a chance to recover. With a swift motion, he knocked the weapon from the soldier's hand and then turned, eyes locked on Zerk. The room fell silent. Zerk stood frozen, staring at Noah with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. The soldiers around him, who had once been so confident, now hesitated. The battle was over. Noah had won, and for the first time, the Zorath began to realize the truth of what he had been saying all along. Humans were not to be underestimated. Noah didn't take his eyes off Zerk as the commander slowly raised his hands in surrender. "You've proven your point," Zerk said quietly. "You've shown us what you're capable of." Noah stood tall, breathing heavily but feeling a surge of triumph. He had made it clear, humanity wasn't just a footnote in this war. They had the power to stand against the Zorath. But Noah wasn't done yet. The test had been a victory, yes, but the real battle was just beginning. Noah stood in the midst of the quiet aftermath, his chest heaving with exertion. His heart still pounded from the fight, but now there was a new feeling, the weight of what he had just done. He had faced down the Zorath soldiers and their commander, Commander Zerk, and come out on top. In the back of his mind, he knew that this battle was far from over, but for now it was a victory. The Zorath soldiers were still recovering, their weapons scattered around the room. They had been strong, coordinated, and skilled, but Noah had outlasted them. It wasn't just about physical strength. It was about determination, the ability to push through when everything seemed stacked against you. That was the human advantage, their will to survive no matter the odds. Zerk, who had been standing at the edge of the room, now stepped forward, his expression unreadable. He wasn't the same as when the fight had started. The cocky arrogance he had worn so easily was gone, replaced by something else. There was no longer any doubt in Noah's mind that the Zorath were beginning to understand just what humanity was capable of. "You've proven yourself human," Zerk said, his voice low. It wasn't a concession, but it was close. "You've defeated my soldiers, including myself. No one has ever done that before. The Empress will not take this lightly." Noah didn't flinch. He had expected this, the acknowledgement. It didn't mean much, not yet. There was still too much to be done. "The Empress is welcome to try," Noah replied, his tone calm but firm. "But it won't be as easy as she thinks." Zerk's eyes narrowed, but he didn't challenge Noah's words. Instead, he nodded slowly. "Perhaps you are right, but don't mistake this for victory. You may have won this battle, but the war is far from over. The Empress will never stop until she has crushed you and your people." Noah's eyes flickered to the other soldiers, who now stood in silence, watching him with a mixture of fear and respect. He could feel the change in the air. They had seen him fight, seen what he was capable of, and for the first time they were beginning to understand that this human, this single human, could pose a threat to their empire. "Maybe," Noah said, his voice steady. "But if she keeps underestimating us, if she keeps thinking humans are weak, then maybe she's the one who will lose." Zerk said nothing, but his gaze lingered on Noah, as if trying to decide whether to argue further. Instead, he turned and gestured for the soldiers to follow him. The room was still and heavy with tension, but Noah could feel the shift in the atmosphere. He had made his mark here, and the Zorath Empire would never forget the day a single human had stood against them. Hours passed before anyone came back to Noah's cell. The door opened, and this time it was not Zerk or a soldier. It was Empress Zalera herself. She entered the room without hesitation, her regal presence filling the space. Her violet skin seemed to shimmer in the dim light, her sharp features set in an expression of unreadable intent. She stood before him, her posture proud and unyielding. For a moment, the silence between them stretched long and tense. "You fought well, human," she said, her voice cool but tinged with something else, something Noah couldn't quite place. Respect, or was it something more dangerous? Noah didn't respond immediately. Instead, he met her gaze head-on. There was no fear in his eyes, there couldn't be. Not now. He had fought her soldiers, he had fought her empire, and he had survived. "I didn't come here to fight you," Noah said finally, his voice calm. "I came to make sure you knew you couldn't just take whatever you wanted. That's not how this works. Humans will fight back. We will never just lie down and die." Zalera's lips curved slightly, though it wasn't quite a smile. "I know," she said, her eyes flashing with something fierce and calculating. "That is why I have kept you alive. You are more than I expected. I wanted to test you to see how far your kind would go, and now I see that you are not so easily broken." Noah didn't trust her words. He knew she was dangerous, calculating, and ruthless. But for a moment, just a brief moment, there was a glimmer of something in her gaze. It wasn't admiration exactly, but something close to it. Maybe it was respect, or maybe it was simply acknowledgement, but Noah knew better than to take it as anything but a trick. "I didn't survive to be your test subject," Noah said flatly. "I'm not your pawn. And neither is my species. We've been pushed too far already." Zalera tilted her head, studying him. There was a flicker of amusement in her eyes, but it was quickly masked by a serious expression. "You speak boldly, human, but do not mistake my patience for weakness. I will not allow you to disrupt the Zorath Empire. You cannot win this war, not alone, and certainly not with your pathetic little rebellion." Noah could feel the weight of her words, but they didn't faze him. He had faced worse. He had faced loss, fear, and isolation. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was the fight. What mattered was the survival of humanity. "I'm not alone," Noah said, his voice steady. "And you've underestimated us. Humanity may not have the size or power of your empire, but we have something you can't measure. We have the will to survive, to fight back, no matter what." Zalera's eyes narrowed, her expression hardening. She had heard these words before, no doubt, but this time it felt different. This time, Noah wasn't just another prisoner making empty threats. He was the symbol of something greater, the last hope for humanity. You talk about will and survival, she said slowly. But what you don't understand is that I have already won. You are here in my grasp, and I will break you. I will break your people just as I have broken countless others. Noah stood his ground, refusing to be intimidated. You haven't broken me yet, and you never will. There was a long pause before Zalara spoke again, her voice softer but filled with an edge. You are right about one thing, human. I have underestimated you. But do not mistake this for victory. The war is still mine to win. And you, she paused, her gaze hardening once again. You are just a small part of it. Noah knew this wouldn't be the end of it. He could feel it in his gut. This was just one battle in a much larger war. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid. He had stood up to the Zorath. He had fought against impossible odds and come out alive. And though the Empress's words weighed heavily on him, he knew one thing for sure. Humanity wasn't going to give up. Not now, not ever. As Zalara turned to leave, Noah called after her. We'll fight, all of us, and in the end it won't be your empire that wins. Zalara paused at the door, her back still to him. We will see, she said quietly before stepping out, leaving Noah alone once more. But as he sat there in the quiet of the cell, Noah knew something had changed. The Zorath might think they had won. They might think they had crushed humanity, but they were wrong. They had only made a mistake. This war wasn't over, and if Noah had anything to say about it, humanity was just getting started.